Hey guys, Christopher Rocky here. This is my review of BBC Symphony Orchestra by Spitfire Audio and how I used it in context of the track I wrote. And I just wanted to talk a bit about how it worked for me, and I guess, like I said, in context of how I used it as opposed to just hearing the sounds in isolation. So not sure if that's a little bit of a different way to review this because the track's already out. So without further ado, I used the Cubase template version of the Logic version, which Spitfire released. And Spitfire didn't release this, some other guy did. So I can't remember how or where to find this. I'm sure if you Google it, Cubase template for BBC SO, it will come up. It's sort of widely available. It's quite good. I found it quite helpful because I was actually new to Cubase. So this is actually the first track that I've done, excuse me, in Cubase, from start to finish, I should say. I had Cubase for like a week or something until I did this. So, I'm not a pro at using Cubase. I did come from Fruity Loops and Pro Tools before this, and it was a bit of a headache because everything's called a different name, which is a bit annoying. I knew what I wanted to do, but I just couldn't figure out for the life of me how to do it. But Google's your friend when things like that happen. And regardless, this is a different discussion, which I will do another discussion about because I think that's an interesting topic, moving between DAWs, which was a big decision for me. So anyway, firstly, I want to just talk about this, the RAM imprint. Now, this is saying 5.5. I've got 32 gig of RAM. If I load this up, it says 7.13. Now, I'm not sure what's going on with the coding within their own player, but how that's being utilized. But there is a difference in what's being told and what's happening. I didn't find it maxing out that bad until I loaded in a few extra mics. So I use Mix 2 quite a lot for this because depending on how I wanted the instrument to sound, I just used one of the mix mics. So if I wanted it more classical sounding, I used Mix 1. If I wanted it more hyped, I used Mix 2. So that's pretty much how they sounded to me, and I was able to get away with using it. There was a few things I wanted to mention. I guess, with the player itself, a lot of people on PC had issues with this and still are, and I don't understand why exactly. I've got a 3-year-old i7. It's a 6700K. I've got 32 gig of RAM. I've got a pretty good motherboard. I've got, a good setup PC. Maybe the parts are just more compatible. So that's my dog scratching the door. Anyway, maybe the parts on my computer are just more compatible. So there wasn't any issues with Windows. Some people weren't even able to, their load times were ridiculous. My load times have been fine since the start. And I've been doing this off an SSD. But it's just one of those libraries. Any library that you're going to get that's going to have, a million zillion mics, you're just going to have to run it off an SSD, especially if you're going to load more than one mic, obviously. So I didn't have any problems running this many instances of the Spitfire player. Now, I even added a few more of myself for the strings, because what I ended up doing was, as you can see here, I've got violin ones, and I left I left them all in there, okay. Well, for instance, okay, maybe that was a bad one to talk about. This one, I just had the Mikado attack because I wanted to match it with the legato because there's not enough attack on the legato for me, which is my first sort of issue. I guess I might talk about that. Is that my first issue with the player, maybe, which I don't think you're really going to have. I mean, I only noticed it in this track because I wanted more of an attack with the legato, so I just matched it with the Mikado. That was it. You can do it inside the player. So you can load up, like in here, you can go, so you can remove or add articulations in this box window to save, RAM, I guess. Doesn't have to load in that articulation, just like, kind of like Contact multi-timbral, but not exactly, but it still works pretty well. I think it's fine. I don't think there's that much of a big issue. I think if you're going to be using VEP Pro and you want to use that as your master and slave it to Cubase, then you're going to have issues, because this is obviously a VST plugin. But if you're just using it inside of your DAW like I am, and you just use it on the computer that you want, you can do it. There might be a way around it with V Pro. I'm not sure. I don't use it. I know there's some way to send out... there's a video Paul Thompson did where he sent out different articulations to different channels, but I've never done that. I just loaded new instances when I wanted to do it, and I used key switches to switch between articulations in other patches. So basically you can add whatever you want, right? So I could technically add in this thing, like, say there's my long legato, I can add in the legato, add that in. If you hold down, I think it's shift, click on the other one, now both of them are highlighted, right? It's just as simple as clicking off it and on again, and shift to select it, but then you can just remove it if you don't want it. So there's the legato, goodbye, done. You can save it, cancel it, whatever. Oh, whoop, no, we've got to save that. Get rid of that, save it, we're done. So I'm not sure why that was wigging out, but let's figure out what's happening. If I play from the start. None of that is BBC SO, just so you know. This is. So I had a major problem with the shorts initially. So when I first downloaded this, the shorts were really sloppy. They were out of time, and they've patched it a number of times since then, and I'm not sure what they've done, but it's all fixed. And I was having to screw around with the milliseconds for the pre-delay, of pre-delay, the before it played the sample, basically. So track delay in milliseconds, obviously. So that they fixed that. I've got them all down now. The strings, I've got a pretty good, for this song it worked well at -50 for all the strings. I had a couple of different settings for the percussion. Some of them are really off. I found them really off. They may have patched it, I don't know. So look, I think they sound gorgeous, to be honest. Like, yeah, wow, something's really wigging out. So I had to do a hard reset, and for some reason Cubase crashed, and for some reason it wasn't playing the samples back properly. One interesting thing I've noticed, though, is if we look at the RAM now, we're up to 18. So I'm not sure what was going on before, why it was saying 5, but now it says 18. Now, one thing I've noticed is it says 18, right? If I go back here, we go into Cubase, let's see. It says 6.82, because I actually took out some samples from this patch because I had every articulation loaded, and in this patch I've only used these 3. So if I play some of the song, watch what happens to ye old Memory and Task Manager. So at the start of the song, now no cracking. I don't know why it was doing it before. Oh, there's the infamous trumpet, by the way. A lot of people complaining there's no legato on it. I mean, it is what it is. Now, in this part, the way I had to make those legatos really cut through was, you can see here, I've got violin 1 doing legato. I've got violin 2 doing legato. I've got the violas doing legato, and I've got the violin leader. The cello doing legato. So I've got a lot of things doing the legato, and while that's happening, all the other I've got cello doing spiccato, and same with violin 1, and that's it. And then I've got my bass. Now, the way I sort of got most of this sound. So if you hear... You can hear there, that's the violas. And they're matching with winds as well, some winds, so... Oh, no, they're not. I take that back. What I was going to say was the viola staccato sounds very windy sounding. I mean, you can hear it sort of lost in the mix there, the attack of it, because I've got so much going on. That was sort of part of why I wanted to do this track, because I actually, when I mastered this track, I used a limiter and Ozone 9 Advance, and I had it fairly pumped because the dynamic range of some of these sounds is very great. And I think that is to the library's credit. It can go very soft to very loud. And, for example, you know, these verses are my quiet parts, and except for that skip, you can hear how loud it can get. It can get really loud, which I think is really good. I think it can be used out of context of a classical setting, although I think it does the classical sound the best. It's very romantic sounding, like the legatos. They're just beautiful, you know. Okay. One thing I do really like about this library are the winds. I think I want to go back and talk about them now. The way I sort of use them in the verses. I sort of use winds. They're like my arpeggiators. If you're into synths, that's what I like doing with winds. That's the bassoon. And I think I used... Oh, it's starting to clip again. It's just the Mix 1 mic. Gee, it really didn't like that, did it? I think the winds are a bonus on... The winds are a win in this library. I want to talk a bit about the percussion as well. I think it is a good percussion section in that you've got all these tuned percussion instruments, which is great, but at the same time, the actual untuned percussion and the toms and the timpani as well, and the bass drums, they're just not that good. They need to be EQ'd a lot. There's not as much variety in them, and it is a very classical sounding orchestral percussion library. I just don't think there's enough variety of that. They've got a few snares which sound great. I mean, you wouldn't want to use this as a percussion, like your main percussion library. There's just not enough, but it's great that it's added in there. And I really think the tuned percussion is really good. It's really great that they've added this in. And I think maybe that's where they lacked in a bit with it, was with maybe some of the percussion where they sort of, you know, you can see where they sort of skipped out a bit. Like in the strings, if you go to the leader, so violin 1 leader, so I did use it in this track, particularly at the end because it's a little bit more intimate there of this track. But what I found was you got a vibrato slider here, which you can move, but it's either on or off. So there's no like amount of vibrato. Whereas I think when you're doing the legato, legato. There's just not as much dynamic layers with this sample library compared to their other ones, like, you know, the Symphony series. Because what I was actually hoping for with this library was this was going to be a version of the symphonic strings, but it wasn't at all. It is like a cheaped out version. I don't know why I thought that. I think because of all the hype and the way they were talking about it and leading up to the release of this, it seemed like this was going to be the greatest thing ever. And, you know, now that it's out, we can see it for what it really is. You know, if I were to summarize this all now, like, I mean, I can go through everything and talk about it, which I don't mind doing. The harp is awesome. That is the harp and the legato at once. The harp is actually really great. So it's all right. Like, I actually think it's great that they've got all this added in there together. So everything sounds pretty good. It's just not as cohesive in terms of dynamic layering. You know, everyone keeps saying that the horn section's the worst. I mean, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? And if you automate it well enough, you can get away with using, like, I've automated quite a bit here at the start. Now, I had to change this quite a bit because through every update, it made it sound completely different, whatever they were doing to this trumpet. So, you know, like if I just go to my horn sections, let's say in the loudest bit. Now, I have it sounding like that because I catered it for this song. So it's not going to rip your head off, you know. That's the A3 trombones. I mean, you can hear there just doing the mod wheel. You know, it's no JXL brass dynamic layering going on here. So I think the best thing about the library are the winds, some of the brass, not all of it, some of it, the tune percussion, and the strings are great. For what it is, and for the price, I actually think it's really good. Now, I think I'll just end it there. I will go through this end section too. Now, so this, if I just go through like the strings matched with the harp and the celeste here. So, I mean, that's just the strings and how lush that sounds. Now, I really wanted to show off the leaders in that section, which you can hear, and you can almost get away with that as a solo library. Like, as you can hear there, like that sounded like some solo strings, but it's not. It's actually just the leader instruments. And I actually was not expecting that when it was coming out. I didn't think that was going to be part of it. Now, if they had I think this library would be so much better if they just had that little bit extra more dynamic layering with the instruments. In that you could use that almost as a solo library if you could control that vibrato a bit more, and it had a bit more range in how it's sort of played like that. But it sounds great. I actually really, really love this. I mean, you can hear there, it's like a little bit wonky. So, but it's in there, you know, and I think that's why I think this is, you know, when you got to get the semantics right when they're saying universal starting point. What they mean is you've got a lot of stuff here. It's going to get you by. It's not the best, but it's pretty darn good, some of it. And I think that's how I would summarize this library, is that for the money, I actually take this as a no-brainer. My wind section at the end too is really good too. Sorry, I want to play that. So I really think the winds in this are great. I actually really like the winds in this. They said they're going to add the piano. I used... What did I use? I think I used the Gentleman. Layered... Yeah, I used the Gentleman. And I laid it with a little bit of Frozen piano, which is actually the best thing that happened to me in 2019. It is a freaking... Oh my God. I've got it panned. But when you layer it, my friends. Sorry, I'm not a piano player. Actually, I'll talk about the other stuff I did now, what I used to layer with this. So, as you can see, I didn't use any other winds, strings, or brass. Or, well, no, percussion I did. Because I used Perk X for sort of the hybrid-y kind of pulse bits. I'll show you where. I think it was here. There you go. Where is it? You know, just a couple of pulsey things to... Just something to keep it a bit moving, because without that it sounded really bare, I thought. I use a bit of vocalizer. I actually... and Signal and Rev is in here quite a bit as underscore, as you can see. And I used a lot of sub-hits from... I can't remember what I used it from. Anyway, regardless, doesn't really matter. I didn't actually add that much to it. You can see it here. Just a couple of pads. Oh, yeah. That's Signal. I did add, though, in the theme here, a sub bass. Just to really round it out and affect it. And I think that made it sound really a lot more powerful in the second time playing that chorusy theme. So that's something I would recommend. Like I felt when I wasn't in there, I noticed it, and I'm like, no, I need this to have more oomph than the first time it was played. So there's my sub bass, right? If I get my strings. I mean, you can tell now. That's without it. That's with it. And it's like totally noticeable now, obviously, because I've brought it out to you. But when it's in the mix... So, I think that's about it. I don't think there's any other bits I need to talk about. I mean, there's the end section here. Oh, I really like some of these cymbals. Really dark cymbal roll. I think it was really great, like, to have that in there. Like I said, like, that's what I mean. I think that's what this library is. It's just sort of a bit of everything. You've got it all at your fingertips. Now, before I forget, I do want to mention this. The chimes were from Symphonia 3, Lumina. Now, there's no chimes in this library. I thought that was really weird, because they've got a triangle, but they don't have chimes. So maybe there's something they'll add. I have no idea, because they've got everything else, for crying out loud. So who's this library for? I think, I actually do think this is for somebody who wants to get into orchestral composing and do orchestral music. Now, when I say that, I don't mean trailer music or like anything hyped up I think orchestral music, if you want to get into scoring orchestral music, this is a good library to get. I really do think that, because you've got everything in there that you could need that you might not have. Like, I actually didn't have some of this stuff, like, you know, in the percussion, at least not recorded this well. Now, is it worth the price for retail? Now, I don't know anybody who buys a sample library at full price, so that's kind of annoying that people actually compare it to that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to compare this to the price you'll probably pay for it, which might be around $7.50. I think on special, you know, 25% off minimum, you know, that's $7.50 USD. You might get it cheaper. You might get 40% off, $600 USD. That would be a total no-brainer if you were to get it at that price, because you got to divide it up into sections. You've got every section of an orchestra, and you've got like a leader version of everything. Then you've got group versions of things. Then you've got percussion, untuned and tuned percussion. Then you've got all the great string sounds, which I think are the best thing about this library are the strings and the winds, I would say. And I really do think it's a good library. I really do think that. Even with all its problems. Now, I didn't have any of the problems that people had. If I got this library and it didn't work for me, then I would absolutely not be happy with this. But I never had any of the issues. Never had the load time issues. Never had the cracking issues until today, because I think there's something with the screen capture that's messing me up. But whatever. We got there in the end. I really do think it's worth the price that it is. Like, if you could get this for $7.50 or under, it's totally worth it. For orchestral music programming. Not, if you're going to use this library for trailer music, it's not what it's for. It's just not, doesn't have that sound. It doesn't have that synthetic sound. You know, it doesn't have ripping off your face staccatos and shorts. It just doesn't go there. It just doesn't do that. It's just a good orchestral library. And I think for the price and for what you get, it's absolutely worth it. When you compare it to, say, you know, a lot of people at the time this came out were comparing this to Nucleus, which I think is a bit unfair, because Nucleus is not like, yeah, sure, it's an orchestra, but the sound of it is very different. I think the best thing about, I don't know Nucleus, but the best thing about Nucleus, from what I can see, is the solo instruments that sound fantastic. That's like a full bonus on top of the strings. Now, if you like the Audio Imperious sound, which is this real synthetic string sound, which personally is not my taste, I enjoy my strings to sound real. I actually prefer this. So this is kind of like somebody like me, because I prefer a real sounding string section, not a synthetic sounding one, which works for a lot of people. People love it and it's great, and they can use it for their trailers and all their modern stuff and whatever. But I think partially that sound can be a bit vogue, and I think maybe that sound can become a bit dated. I'm not sure. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Maybe 5-10 years time, people might look back at that sound and be like, ugh, it's so noughties, you know, 2010s or whatever. I don't know what era, you know, when we're in 2030s. When, you know, the AIs will be writing all the music for us. No, okay. The issues with the player, if you're going to want to use this with VE Pro, you're not going to like it, because there's no proper multi-timbral out things. You know, now that we're sitting here paused, and maybe we've listened through the track through, now Task Manager is telling me 5 gig again. We're still probably sitting around 7 or something, 6.8 there. So I'm not really sure what's going on with this RAM thing. So that's gone from 18, 19 gig, you know, down to 5, 68% memory. So there's something in the coding of the plugin, I think, the Spitfire plugin, app plugin, whatever it is, that is doing this. It's not Cubase. It is definitely doing this. So it's almost like it's purging itself, maybe, or it's sort of going, okay, we've loaded all the articulations in. Now we've played through the song. We know what's being played. We don't need to load these. I'm not sure. I don't know, because they haven't really explained how they go about this. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just my computer wigging out. I have no idea. It's just something to keep in mind, like, because you might get the wrong idea. You might think like, wow, this is only using 5 gig, and it's like, I've only got 16. And then you get it, and then you try and do a track like I've done, and it said it was using 90% of my RAM at 1920 gig. So I'm not sure what's going on there. But, okay, apart from the problems and the PC problems people were having, so that is something to keep in mind, is that if you're running this on PC or even a Mac, and it's an older-ish computer, you're really going to have to check to see if it's going to work with your parts, which is a bit of a bummer. Maybe it's optimized now totally and they've fixed all these problems. I'm not entirely sure. It's just I remember when it came out, there was all these huge issues. Now, what I would like to see, just one tiny little gripe for me, what I would like to see is having some kind of just an attack slider. Just an attack slider so I can change when the start of the legato hits. I don't know why you wouldn't add that into your strings. Just have an attack slider on your longs and your legato. Like, that would be so handy. It's in contact. Like, that's the thing people are complaining about is this contact thing. Really, for me, that's the only thing that's affected me. And I'm sort of semi into screwing up with the settings and doing my own patches inside contact in other software. So, in other libraries, I should say. So, for me, that was the biggest thing. So, I don't know how deep you want to go with this, because you're limited to what this player is then. And you're limited to the way it looks. Now, to be honest, once I got my automation set, all this stuff on the side, it's annoying that you have to check this, though. If you got to check to see what patch uses what thing. Reverb, release, vibrato. Some use tightness, and then there's variation. Now, it doesn't tell you which is using what, right, each time. So now this one uses tightness. Now, I sort of got the idea, like each shorts use tightness, spiccatos have release, but this other spiccato doesn't. So, that's... I don't know why you just wouldn't permanently have that there. So, there's the UI complaint that people have with this. Like I said, once I had my like vibrato mapped and things like set, everything set, tightness set, all that, I didn't look at this much, to be honest. I wasn't looking at it much. I was in here. This is where I was. And I was using this thing. And, like, I hardly ever looked at the app once everything was up and running. So I don't think that's a huge complaint. In that, yeah, sure, it makes things a bit annoying because nobody's used to it. Just missing the features of contact, all that sort of stuff. I do have faith that they will continue to upgrade their plugin and the way it looks and the UI and everything. I really do have faith in them. Like, they're Spitfire are a company that aren't going anywhere. They're only going to go in terms of keeping on moving with the times and upgrading things, and I think they're actually a good company that you can trust. The only thing that, like I said, I complained was the attack slider. For me personally, just an attack slider on the longs. It just makes it a little bit unusable when I'm trying to pass through notes and to have the consistency between the samples. So matching it with the Mikado helped. My other complaint, which isn't about the library itself, was maybe just the hype marketing was it's a bit annoying. I know they got to do it. Like, it's what everybody does, hype marketing. But I think it was slightly deceptive in that what they were proposing before it was even released. Because they were making out like it was... I got the impression this was going to be a contender for the Symphonic series. That's the impression I got. Now, every time I said, like, this week is the next Albion thing. And after this, I'm just like, whatever. And the Hans Zimmer debacle, I'm just like, whatever. I'm at that point now with their marketing. I'll wait till it comes out and we'll see what it is. I guess that's the best thing with Spitfire is to wait for any library, really. Wait for it to come out. Unless it's someone you absolutely trust and you're willing to just take that risk. Like I took that risk with Orchestral Tools, Time Micro, because I love Time Macro. I'm getting Time Micro. I got the pre-order. So unless you really are invested and you know what you're getting into and it's reasonably priced, then do it. But if it's $1,000 USD, which is not, say $750, whatever, it's $750 USD or $700 USD, and there's no reviews of it, no one knows what it is, and from the marketing, what I thought it was Symphonic Series level of, say, programming of the samples, and it's not. It's like surface level everything, but we've got everything for this very low price. I don't know why I thought that, but I just got that impression from the marketing, because I was like, it's right, it's cheap, and it's like you get all this stuff, it's all these mics, which I actually is awesome, right? The problem is you need a hefty amount of RAM if you're going to want to utilize any of those mics. So there's another downer for this library, is that you are not going to be able to run 5 mics on every freaking instrument. Like, unless you've got, 128 gig at least, because it just chews up your memory like mental. So that was only where I ran into problems with my 32 gig, was when I started adding mics in. So, which is why I just stuck with the Mix 1 and Mix 2 in the end, and a couple of close mics. And that was it. I didn't go beyond that. But I went through and listened to a few of them, and I think it's absolutely amazing that they've done this. I think that is actually a brilliant idea, to have that many microphones for the orchestral library. The only thing, now that we have the JXL Brass, which is out, Orchestral Tools, which has the ability to get mics, make your own mix, and basically master it down to one channel imprinted on your hard drive. So and then you're only using the imprint of one mic. Now, you have to copy this Spitfire. I don't care how you do it. Just copy this, please, and do this with every single library you have. Every single developer that exists that makes sample libraries, please do this. It is the best thing ever. I'll be very annoyed if Orchestral Tools have some sort of patent on this and they don't let anybody use it unless they pay them, because this should be they should get the credit. It should be called the OT mix or something. Maybe that's the clause that if you're going to use this, you have to call it that, because it is the best idea ever. So far, there's not much innovation, very slow amount of innovation in terms of sample libraries coming out over the years, and I think that is literally the best thing that's ever happened, because that's going to save so much RAM and CPU. You look at it like this. This is the instrument that we play, is the computer, right? Composers, we play the computer. Yeah, we got pianos and we got things that we record in, but we play the computer. To help us play the computer better, by having that mic option is just unbelievable. Imprinting the mic onto your hard drive of the mix that you have. Now, I think BBC SO should absolutely do this, because there's so many freaking mics. So, Paul, Christian, everybody Spitfire, please do this. But that's my ideas. Now, about this library, I think, like I said, it's worth it if you want to do orchestral music. I'm going to say that. It's absolutely worth it. It's a buy. There's nothing else really like it that's this cohesive, that has everything in it, that sounds the way it does. Sure, it's missing some dynamic layers. Sure, it's not Symphonic Series. Sure, it's not trailer music-esque library. But for what it is, I actually think it's really great. I think it actually is great value for money. It really is. Say it's $1,000, that's $250 USD per group. You could even break it down to per instrument what you're paying, which is what I like to do. So, that it's probably, seriously, it's probably between $5 and $10 per instrument. You could look at it like that, value for money wise, that way. It absolutely is value for money. even at full price. I wouldn't pay full price for it though. Don't pay full price for a freaking library. Get it on sale. It's worth it. Just know what you're getting into. And that's why I wanted to talk about this for so long, because, you know, a bit more of a cohesive discussion around it without all the negativity and without all the hype. I just want to be a bit more realistic. I don't regret not purchasing it. I just wish I knew what I was getting into before I got it, which was, like I said, I thought it was like a symphonic series contender. It's not. It's not that. It is its own sort of thing. You know, that's what I mean by semantics of universal starting point of what Spitfire audio mean when they say that. When I hear universal starting point, I think like, this is what you should be using, like beyond the symphonic series, because it's got everything. Look at all the mics, look at all the instruments, we've got every section. This is an orchestra library, which it is. It just doesn't have all, you know, it's maybe not, the versatility is really going to come into the mic selection, and it's going to come in with the variety of instruments, not the instruments themselves by themselves isolated, if you know what I mean. The trombones in this, you're not going to be blowing anyone's face off with it. Anyway, thanks for watching me ramble about this. I'm sorry that I was a bit all over the place. I hope it helped you make a decision if you were thinking about getting this. I'm sure I missed a lot of things. I'm sorry. I guess this is just my little experience with doing this one song. You know, it's not like we haven't had this library for years and we've done like tracks upon tracks with it. So, you know, that I'm sure that will come. I will use this again. Absolutely. I'm absolutely going to use this again. Probably not the brass so much. But I think the winds and the strings and, you know, the tuned percussion and, you know, the harp and the celeste, very good. And they said they're going to add a few more instruments as well. So you can look forward to that too, I guess. If you want to listen to this track, I have a clip of it on this same YouTube channel, which I will link in the description. You can follow me. I'm going to keep doing more tracks and then doing in-depth sort of talks about them, so you can see what I did, I guess. Hopefully I'll get better at doing this. Anyway, I hope you're all well. Peace out, guys. See ya.